Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This is a dramatized, fictional what-if told purely for entertainment, not a report of real events, because what happens when the most beloved man in entertainment walks into a studio expecting respect, only to find himself staring down a segment engineered for spectacle, is a question that reveals more about the machine than the man. So, imagine it. An autumn Tuesday, the ABC building, humming with routine, red lights warming up above cameras, producers counting down in clipped whispers, floor managers skating across polished linoleum with headsets and clipboards, while an audience settles like a low tide of anticipation. And in the green room sits Keanu Reeves, 58, and ageless, wearing a dark sweater that reads as intentional understatement, hands loosely folded, the posture of a person who learned long ago that grace is not decoration, but discipline. The monitors loop the show's intro swirling graphics, bright music, the familiar promise of conversational theater, while makeup artists float in, feathering powder, smoothing flyaways, one of them giggling as she remembers the subway video where he gave up his seat to a nurse, another murmuring about a friend's kid whose hospital wing mysteriously received a donation with no press release. And Keanu thanks them with that soft-edged voice that makes small talk feel like meditation. The hallway smells of coffee and hot lights, and beyond the curtain, the set is an organism in motion, Steadicams breathing, jib arms gliding, the panel shuffling note cards, smiles switching on and off like pilot flames, and he steps through with a nod to the stagehand, crosses into the brightness, and the room lifts applause without malice, the uncomplicated kind that says we have paid for two things today, a story and a feeling. For a while, it's exactly that. In a pleasant loop of craft and gratitude, he tells a self-deprecating tale about missing a mark and landing in cold prop water. The audience exhales in laughter. Someone in row 3 clutches a glossy still from his latest blockbuster. The host to his right asks about physical prep. The one on his left asks about mentorship, and he speaks about crews in the rain at 3 a.m., about stunt coordinators who think in equations, about the quiet battery of teamwork that powers frames we clap for and forget. Then the river changes temperature by a degree so small, you'd miss it if you were only listening and not feeling. Cards flip. A glance flashes like a scalpel. A preface disguised as a compliment turns its teeth, and the question arrives wrapped in velvet. Why doesn't your voice rally to our causes? Why choose privacy when the world demands declarations? Why stand in a doorway when the street is on fire and the studio goes silent in that paradoxical way? Live rooms do, full of bodies and yet suddenly as private as a confessional, and he holds the pause like a craftsman examining a seam before deciding whether to pull. His answer is even unstacked, the kind of sentence built from wood rather than glass. I try to live my values instead of performing them, and if the work matters, it will matter without a microphone attached, and the air tightens, because what is television if not a cathedral to microphones? What is morning discourse if not a marketplace of loud certainty? And someone at the desk leans in, voice clipped, framing the space as binary silence or complicity, megaphone or moral failure, and the room pivots from interview to tribunal without changing a single light cue. Here the narrative could detonate into shouting, but our protagonist doesn't combust, he contracts, like a star concentrating gravity. "Thank you for inviting me," he says, looking at the semicircle of faces who are, in this fiction, proxies and not portraits, emblems and not individuals, because this story is about pressure, not people, about a system that confuses confession with contribution. And he continues, "I donate, I visit, I sit with families when the cameras go home, I write checks without hashtags, and hold hands without handlers. And if that is not your preferred syntax of decency, that's okay, but I won't auction sincerity for applause." A section of the audience claps, not the thunder of teams, but the staccato of recognition, and the panel tries to reframe with the rhetoric of accountability, invoking the ethics of platforms, the math of reach, and he listens, really listens, which is its own kind of defiance, then turns slightly toward the lens that matters, the one that lives in living rooms, and speaks to the invisible majority on couches and break rooms. "You don't need me to teach you how to be good. You are good while no one is watching. You get up, pack lunches, fix engines, chart vitals, check homework, and that is activism without press kits. The control room splits screens, chomps on delay. Producers exchange looks that say this is either disaster or lightning in a jar, and it's funny how those are sometimes the same thing. because truth on television is a fragile miracle and a ratings grenade. Tension radiates, the desk pushes once more, now with the sharp implement of accusation, cowardice by curation, safety masquerading as humility, and that's the moment when Keanu stands, not with a slam, but with a lift, smooth as choreography, a movement that pirouettes the power dynamic, because posture is a language. "I'm not angry," he says with a half-smile that closes doors softly. "I'm disappointed not in disagreement, which is good soil, but in performance, in policing sincerity, in building arenas where every sentence must pick a side before it's even fully born." He unclips his mic like a surgeon returning an instrument, places it gently on the armrest, and for a heartbeat the show itself forgets its blocking, because a human moment has punctured the script. In the galleries, someone whispers, "Run a bumper." Another whispers, "Let it breathe." In the audience, a woman wipes her eye with the corner of a program, not because a celebrity is brave, but because a person remembered the difference between announcement and action, and he turns to the desk, to the emblematic chorus, and offers a last bridge rather than a blaze. We probably want the same horizon: fairness, mercy, opportunity, but I won't sell simple answers in a complex world. I won't use the artwork to bludgeon the audience. I won't measure compassion by decibel. Then he thanks the crew, as he always does in these stories we tell about him, the ones where small courtesies live longer than headlines, nods to the camera op who has been standing on a bad knee for 30 minutes, and walks off stage into the labyrinth of cables and cases and coffee cups, and the moment elongates behind him like a comet tail. Outside the building, traffic keeps its bargain with time, and somewhere a PA texts their mother. He was kind. He was prospect. Calm. The internet will make a bonfire and call it weather. But it felt like weather, the real kind that changes a season. Once the clip hits the bloodstream of the world, the usual choreography ensues in our fable. Thumbnails and think pieces, split-screen panels and punditry dressed as care, brands calculating adjacency, strangers shouting in fonts. But threading through the noise is a counter-melody of quiet stories. Janitors who found envelopes on a Friday. Oncology wards where an unannounced visitor brought books in silence and listening. Gaffers who remember a rap night when he stacked chairs until the room was bare. None of it verifiable here. None of it meant to convince. Only to illustrate a thesis that not all goodness wants witnesses. In executive rooms, the show consults its maps, debates the line between grilling and grandstanding, and in living rooms, the audience debates something older. What do we owe one another in the public square? Is decency a volume or a verb? Our fiction ends not with a triumph or a cancellation, but with an aftertaste, because the point of a parable isn't the plot, but the mirror it holds. And if this story lingered, perhaps it is because it offered an unruly premise in an era of tidy outrage, that a person can choose to live their values in the quiet, fierce spaces off stage and still be doing enough, that refusing to weaponize art against audiences is not neutrality, but craft. That walking away can be an act of respect for both the question and the self. And so the closing image is small on purpose, no roaring podiums, no victory laps, just a man at a children's library after hours, stacking paperbacks with a volunteer as a janitor hums, lights going out in patient clicks. The absence of cameras not a loss but a design, and if somewhere a viewer who watched that morning chooses to call their father instead of posting, to bring soup to a neighbor instead of declaring allegiance, to listen twice before replying once, then the reckoning promised in the opening wasn't fury at all, but recalibration, a reminder that in a culture that monetizes our loudest selves, there remains a stronger currency, the work done when nobody is keeping score. So, yes, viewer discretion was advised, and in the end, it revealed the discretion that matters, the courage to decide that character is a practice, not a performance, that principle is a posture, not a press tour, and that the loudest roar can be a quiet refusal to trade your integrity for applause.